We could have built the future together.
I don't think so.
We're living in a renaissance for animated films based on toys and comics that manage to both dazzle and dig deeper. The Spider-Verse films and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem recently reinvigorated their respective heroes with both visual and narrative panache that was pitched at and landed with longtime fans and newcomers alike. In that way, Transformers 1, which has been in development since around the time the first Spider-Verse movie was announced, feels late to the party and far less self-assured.
Look, wheels! I need wheels!
Taking a cue from the eye-poppingly stacked cast of 1986's The Transformers the Movie, which featured the voices of legends like Orson Welles, Leonard Nimoy, and Scatman Crothers, Transformers 1's robots are brought to life by high-profile talent like Chris Hemsworth, Scarlett Johansson, Brian Tyree Henry, Keegan-Michael Key, John Hamm, Lawrence Fishburne, and Steve Buscemi. The obvious standout from that impressive roster is Henry's D-16, whose pain and grievance with the system on the Transformers' home planet of Cybertron pushes him down his dark path towards becoming the villainous Megatron. Henry's conviction and emotional vulnerability regularly steals scenes and frequently represents the only real humanity Transformers 1 has to offer, which, for the record, is even more important when there are no actual humans around. The script doesn't do D-16's arc many favors, with his nuanced feelings about Cybertron's storied defender Sentinel Prime, played by John Hamm, completely flattened out by a plot that's too busy juggling a fetch quest and a razor-thin political conspiracy to reliably keep that narrative train on the tracks. All that Cybertron lore and backstory can be interesting at times, but none of it is covered with enough depth or novelty to feel fresh. Transformers 1 is designed to be accessible to audiences with all levels of familiarity with the robots in disguise, but for anyone who paid attention to Michael Bay's first 3 live-action Transformers films, and Bay is a producer here, you'll note, the movie throws warning flags by choosing MacGuffins that render almost every turn of the story a foregone conclusion. Chris Hemsworth's Orion Pax begins the story quite far from the Optimus Prime we know he'll become, with little direction or motivation to get him there. Even though his journey from Robo-Miner to Robo-Messiah doesn't feel all that well drawn, in spite of some nice spacey exposition from Lawrence Fishburne's Alpha Trion, Hemsworth does do good work evolving his performance over the course of the 104-minute runtime to account for the gravitas and responsibility that come with his growing status. Starting off as a powerless Energon miner, Orion Pax's good nature does make his ascension to Prime status somewhat gratifying, and more so as the big climactic battle approaches.
It's time to show him we are more than meets the eye.
Oh, no.
It may not surprise you to hear that transformation is a major theme here, but it's something that Transformers 1 communicates by telling us, not showing us or making us feel it. Still, it does successfully build out the relationship between Orion Pax and the friend he calls D. Mining the fuel that drives life on Cybertron is dangerous work, and an early near disaster sets up the close bond between D-16 and Orion Pax. D is all about following the rules, Orion is a lot more loose, and the ways that those personality types first complement then clash with each other produce some good tension here and there.
Allow me.
Keegan-Michael Key's B-127, Bumblebee as we know him, and Badassatron as you will definitely not call him even though he really wants it,
Badassatron
does score a few laughs with his stir-crazy enthusiasm for his new gang, but B's usefulness to the story is spent immediately, turning what could have been an effective cameo into a distraction from the more prominent bots. Most of Transformers 1's humor is pretty basic, broad enough for everyone to be in on the joke, but generally nothing that rises above quippy, robot-themed banter. The shortest end of the characterization stick goes to Johansson's Alita 1, for reasons that have very little to do with her performance. The Black Widow star has done well in plenty of voice roles, her and the Jungle Book immediately come to mind, but Alita is drawn here as a caricature of a girl boss devoid of any real personality traits other than stern. Playing one of the only 2 female Cybertronians in the movie, the other being an angry spider lady, so take that for what it's worth, is an unenviable position for Johansson, and it basically forces her to shout at the boys to stop them from getting into trouble for the entire runtime.
Maybe it's just me, but he's different.
Yeah, no, I picked up on that.
Transformers 1's world and character designs pull heavily from the original Generation 1 era. Straight lines, wide curves, and smooth, shiny faces as far as the eye can see. Perhaps befitting of how closely it recreates the appearance of the toys, Transformers 1 looks best at rest. in dialogue scenes, or the few moments of contemplation invited by Cybertron's vaporwave sunset. The sun slipping below the horizon may be the coolest shot pulled off by director Josh Cooley, and I promise I haven't forgotten to include transforming robots in that calculation. Transformers 1 splits its time between the subterranean capital Iacon and Cybertron's abandoned surface, with the more interesting scenes taking place underground and the more interesting visuals captured above. On the musical front, Brian Tyler's score unfortunately barely registers. It's generically orchestral with rote touches of electronica that elevate neither the drama or action. And that's a little bit surprising because Brian Tyler actually turned in one of my favorite animated movie scores of the last few years. He did the score for the Super Mario Bros. Movie, which was a really good mix of staying true to the game music and kind of making it come alive for a movie. And that just doesn't happen here. Tyler's score in Transformers 1 is just background music. It may as well not be there. Setting the story entirely on Cybertron raises the question of how well a Transformers movie can function without humans there to draw contrast to the future Autobots and Decepticons. It's not just because of the logical quandaries that abound, like why it is that Orion Pax can turn into a big rig billions of years before any sort of truck would be invented on a planet light years away from Cybertron. You might not be thinking about these kinds of things, but I definitely do.
If we survive this, I'm gonna kill you!
I accept those terms.
Transformer 1's entire sense of perspective suffers from not having meatbags around for scale. It's a problem from the opening moments, when we see Orion Pax climbing up a building to sneak into an archive for information on the lost primes. He's quickly caught by guards who are much bigger than him, but how big is Orion to begin with? The scale issue is at its most egregious during Transformers 1's chases, races, and all-out robot warfare, which it deploys at all the expected moments. The action may be flashy and fast-paced, but good luck keeping track of what's actually going on. While the most famous Transformers silhouettes are all stark and in keeping with what you'd imagine those characters to look like, the action is largely captured by the virtual camera in a way that turns everything into a blur of nondescript robot bodies crashing against alien landscapes and architecture. Having any means of comparison becomes critical in these moments as you're trying to understand things like where your heroes are, how fast they're going, and who's fighting who, what direction they're going, basics that Transformers 1 doesn't always account for. There are times when the battles feel like a kid slamming two Transformers toys together, and I say that with the lived experience of having done the very same with my Beast Wars, Rat Trap, and Cheetor toys as a kid. But at least in that instance, I could keep track of what was going on, who was involved, what was at stake, and where my fruit roll-up was in relation to the plastic carnage. Sadly, you can't always say the same for Transformers 1. You will lose your fruit roll-up from time to time.
I appreciate you having my back. No matter what.
Transformers 1's core duo of Orion Pax and D-16 and the fallout of their broken friendship provide an occasional spark, but despite the efforts of its impressive voice cast and a standout performance from Brian Tyree Henry, the animated origin story rarely shows anything more than meets the eye. Its G1-inspired aesthetic is cool in small doses, but Transformers 1 regularly fumbles trying to follow its transforming robots through the action. Though the tragedy of Optimus Prime and Megatron's storied rivalry could have felt larger than life, Transformers 1 is mostly content with half-hearted puns and barely legible Cybertronian battles that could have used some major transforming before, say it with me, rolling out.
Look, that's Starscream, and you're Shockwave, and Soundwave. Enough! Gosh, raise your hand if Wave is in your name. There's a lot of Wave.
Thanks for watching. For more movie reviews, check out what we thought of Beetlejuice and Folie à Deux. And as always, be sure to keep it right here on IGN.